Now, blood remains liquid despite the presence of a vast excess of coagulation proteins and platelets. Now, this is because of a number of adaptive measures which suppress the coagulation machinery. Now, first of all, each of the coagulation proteins circulates in the blood in an inactive form. Now, secondly, unlike the subendothelium, the endothelium which lines the blood vessels is devoid of any thrombogenic tissue factor and collagen, thereby preventing the activation of platelets and the coagulation cascade. Finally, maintenance of brisk flow through the vessels basically ensures that any coagulation proteins which are activated are quickly whisked away for disposal in the liver. However, when the vessel wall is injured, the coagulation apparatus is promptly mobilized. Now, once activated, the serine protease activity of factor XIIa cleaves and activates its substrate prekallikrein and factor XI into kallikrein and factor XIa. Now, these proteins are basically anchored to the subendothelium by a high molecular weight kininogen. Now, kallikrein serves to amplify the activation of the intrinsic system by activating neighboring molecules of factor XII. Now, once activated, the serine protease activity of factor XIa cleaves its anchoring cofactor, high molecular weight kininogen, and diffuses into the solution where it activates factor IX in the presence of calcium. Activated factor IX then proceeds to form a complex with activated factor VIII and calcium, which binds to the phospholipid-rich surface of platelets where activation of factor X occurs. Now, this event marks the end of the intrinsic pathway and the initiation of the common pathway of the coagulation cascade. Unlike the intrinsic system, the extrinsic system, as its name suggests, requires components extrinsic to the blood to initiate the coagulation cascade. Now, disruption of the endothelium exposes the subendothelium, which expresses tissue factor on its cell surface. Tissue factor is depicted as a serpentine tubular structure here. Once tissue factor is exposed to the blood, circulating factor VII binds to it and forms a tissue factor-factor VII complex, which promotes the autoactivation of factor VII to factor VIIa. In the presence of calcium and membrane phospholipids, the tissue factor-factor VIIa complex proceeds to activate factor X, which marks the initiation of the first step of the common pathway. The activation of factor X is the point at which the intrinsic and extrinsic pathways converge to form the common pathway of the coagulation cascade. Factor X is activated on the phospholipid-rich surface of activated platelets. Activated factor X forms a complex with its activated cofactor factor Va in the presence of calcium, which converts prothrombin to thrombin. Now, thrombin is basically the master regulator of the coagulation cascade. Thrombin cleaves activation peptides from fibrinogen to form soluble fiber monomers. Now, these subsequently polymerize to form an insoluble, loose fibrin clot at the site of the injury. Thrombin also activates circulating factor XIII, a transglutaminase, which catalyzes the formation of covalent intermolecular crosslinks between fibrin molecules, providing the necessary structure for a stable fibrin clot. Thrombin also serves to activate the surrounding platelets that, in conjunction with the fibrin clot, seal the breach in the vessel wall. Finally, thrombin also activates factor V and factor VIII in a positive feedback loop, further amplifying the activation of the coagulation cascade.